Hey, so good morning, everyone. Who didn't catch that our community had something of a crisis this spring? I don't see any hands. Yep. Okay. I like to call myself, I think I said yesterday to someone, I think I said relentlessly constructive and positive. And so the things that happened in the spring, you know, they bothered me, they worried me, they upset me to some degree, but they give me a lot of pause for thought as well. And this is something of a reaction to that, and it's part of my journey from then until now, and part of what I think is important about who we are and what we do, and some suggestions or some thoughts that I've been having about how we might do things better next time, how we might come out of this stronger as a community. And it's just me, and it's just the result of conversations I've been having. And it is in no way, you know, prescriptive. This is Drupal, right? To a lot of people, but it's not really Drupal to me. To me, our killer app was never the code. Our killer app is a global community of smart people solving hard problems together in technology, online, in person, you know, and also between humans. So I have some confidence that we can solve these problems as well. But, you know, the last two photos, they were taken at DrupalCamp Barcelona, which was the autumn of 2015. Drupal 8 was never going to come out, right? We had missed another release deadline, another possibility to celebrate Drupal. And who remembers, who was at Barcelona? And who do you remember the feeling in the community at the time? It was pretty heavy. That was a really low energy DrupalCon. But look at us, right? Like, this is still Drupal, and we're, you know, this is the first commit ceremony at the code sprint. And, you know, despite everything, our community really has this, you know, and it's, so for me, the definition of community is a group of people with shared goals and values. And our goals in the Drupal community are pretty clear. This is my version only, but, you know, we should be making Drupal better, and with a better Drupal, we can make better other things, right? We can make the world a better place, realize our own visions, help our clients, and so on. But what about our shared values? If we're really a community, what are our shared values? There are a bunch of things that we talk about a lot, but where are they documented as our values? How do we agree that they're important to us, and how do we know we really share these values? So I thought about this, and I thought maybe we could codify some values. What the Drupal community might want to stand for. And then we could do a thing that a lot of other communities have done in the past. So we could create a statement of values that the community is behind. Now, I think this should happen through a community process. I think there should be, you know, and we're very, very good at having very long discussions, right? So we've got that covered. Thank you. And you know, we're from all over the places, from lots of cultures, and that should make it hard to work together. But look what we've done in the last 16 years. I mean, it's actually amazing. And the level of cooperation, and the level of understanding on the grand scale, the lack of conflict, right? In a community of 35,000 developers nowadays, in a community of thousands of companies and hundreds of thousands of people actively involved in this, our level of conflict is relatively low, which I take as a good sign. So I think we do perceive some common values, and I think that this, you know, mission of making the Drupal thing itself better is a kind of a glue for us. I need to do this. Who's seen me speak before? Cool. Hi everyone. My name's Jeffrey McGuire. Just about everybody in the world except my mother calls me Jam. I do strategic marketing communications focused around open source. And that means for organizations who support open source projects, for organizations that work with open source, and all of that wonderful, interesting area where there's a crossover between open source and business. As of now, I'm no longer with Acquia, where I've been for the last 9 years, and I am in a really interesting phase, and I'm getting the opportunity to help build new great projects and organizations. This is how I think about that stuff. As a communications person, I think if we communicate authentically and truthfully, that drives connection, and connection, also common values, drives community, and our communities very, very clearly deliver business value, and as a professional, this is the stuff I'm really, really interested in. So, and it's the stuff I love to talk about all the time, so, let's talk about it this weekend. I'll be here the whole time. If you've seen me give a talk before, I almost guarantee that you've seen the Golden Circle before. This is a concept developed by a guy called Simon Sinek, which I'm very, very fascinated by. And, if the definition of a community is the condition of sharing or having certain attitudes, interests, and values in common, I think that what's been happening in Drupal to some degree is that we've been making a lot of assumptions about what our values are. And my 16-year-old is very fond of telling me, "Daddy, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me." Thank you. But, he's a good 16, so I have to let it slip. We're all in a relationship here. We have this huge amount of value in common, and this thing that we really care about, and each other as well. I deeply care about you as my fellow community members, colleagues, and so on. And if we just go on assuming it's pretty clear now that we don't agree on everything, and if we don't agree a little better, the community's at risk. And then it might just be a technology, and if it's just a technology, I don't know how motivating that is, and, this camp wouldn't make as much sense, and, that beer that you're going to buy me later, like, why are you doing that? So very, very quickly, Simon Sinek talks about if you don't have a raison d'être, if you don't know why your organization, you, yourself, your community, why you're doing something, right? It's almost impossible to take meaningful action that's measurable in any way, right? If you start with, for example, I contribute because it's the right thing to do, that's what you're doing, and you're sort of, what are you shooting at? How do you know your contribution is effective unless you've defined for yourself why you're contributing, right? There's a whole other talk I do about the business value of contribution, where this is something I really believe in. So let's say the point of this talk right now is that to some degree, I think we're lacking a why in Drupal right now. So perhaps if we made this statement of values that I'm positing, maybe couple it with a mission statement that's something where we say, maybe it's just, we want to make Drupal better because that lets us make better things. I don't know. If we have a mission statement and a statement of values, then we sort of know why we're around. And then we could make a new code of conduct, perhaps, new set of rules, structures, less rules, more rules, I don't know. But have if we actually agree upon what we're doing here, we could agree on better structures, more resilient structures, more people with more responsibility than we have right now, and that could solve some of the scalability problems in our community. And then when we take actions, we can tell if they're in line with our decisions about who we are, and we can measure whether they're effective, and we can iterate on our values or on our actions to see how we're doing, and if we can do better. So that's the kind of the point of this whole talk, and what I'm sort of trying to get at. So as I said, we sort of assume that we're on the same page about a lot of things, and we talk about all the contribution and karma and paying it forward, and it feels like we're talking about the same thing. So it must mean that we all feel the same thing, right? Well, we know that that's not true. And when I was trying to work out what the heck happened to us in the spring, I was talking with a friend of mine who's not a Drupal person and comes from a completely different background, and she said, and she has a bunch of Drupal friends. She said, look at all these blog posts, transparency all over the place, where does it say that transparency is important to you Drupal people? I can't find anything in writing that says you have to be inclusive either. What do you mean by that? You know, and I had to admit that I couldn't find statements about that in any of our official web presences either. We do have a code of conduct, but I consider that in its current version a little bit imperfect, and I'll get to that in a bit. But you know, lots and lots and lots of us made assumptions about who we are and who we should be, and some of us feel let down. So, you know, I do think we need to reorganize to some degree. Dries has also recognized that and begun talking about in public how he needs to do fewer things better, and I think that's laudable, and I think that's exactly right. But I think that we should start this reorganization with a set of common values. If we just start yelling at each other and arguing about what's important, right, without our actual sense of mission, how can we measure that that's right? How can we know that we're going in a productive direction? So, you know, we should not be putting Dries under so much pressure, and we shouldn't be asking him to do so much, right? Project lead, running the Drupal Association, running a company, and all the other things that he does. He's a father, and so on. That's too much to ask of one human, and we as the community, right, need to stand up and take some responsibility now. Those of us who've been in the community let's say longer than 5 or 6 years, have gone through several phases of this before, and new governance structures and creating the code of conduct and creating different working groups and so on. But I've met a lot of people who came into Drupal in the golden years of the Drupal 7 phase, and they discovered a community with fully formed, commercially organized DrupalCons and a Drupal association that had its act together and was pouring money into Drupal 8. And Acquia sponsoring everything it could sponsor for a time, and Microsoft sponsoring, and all this. It was really, really beautiful, and it became very easy for us to kind of focus on our stuff. And I think that all of that is about to change, and I think that we need to step up, and we need to acknowledge our part in it, and you know, we need to have this values conversation. So, like I said, if we can agree upon some values, even if we only agree on most of them, but have a sense that we're pulling this together, it can help us create new structures. And I want to talk about, you know, how do we actually act on those a little bit. By the way, this is the first time I'm giving this talk, so I hope it, you know, I'm still trying to shape this as we go. I keep seeing something and fearing that I'm repetitive, but, you know, please forgive me. But look. Why should you care? You're here for the CXO day, right? And I'm kind of talking about this community crap, and maybe that should all be tomorrow when the developers and all the people are here. How many of you are Drupal developers? Hey. And how many of you manage developers, run a business, talk with clients, that sort of thing? Very good. And how many of you do Drupal maybe within a larger institution, a university, or some sort of a company? Nope. None of those weirdos here today. Oh, there you are. Sorry. They're a little slow on the update. No, I'm kidding. So for the people in the room who consider yourselves business people, right? How many of you, well, I'm going to stop doing the how many of yous because it gets boring. But a lot of us rely on you to sell technology projects so that we can all pay our rent, raise our families, and so on. I assume that everyone in the room uses Drupal. Is there anyone here to assess Drupal because you're considering adopting it? Nope. Okay, we're amongst ourselves. The Drupal, so why I'm talking about this with you and why it's important to you and why it's important to me. The Drupal community is a sales tool. It matters to you. The health of the community is directly tied to our success. You know, it's tied to a bunch of other factors, but I know that when the Australian government was assessing the GovCMS platform decision, because I was involved in it peripherally, they did an objective assessment of several different platforms, Drupal, LifeRay, and one or two others made it to the last round, and in a feature-for-feature, point-for-point comparison, that's a document like this, of course, in the end, Drupal did not come in first place on that supposedly objective, supposedly, feature-based comparison. How valuable those things are is a completely different discussion, but I'm saying the Australian government didn't put Drupal in first place in this objective section of the feature-based section of the assessment, but the Australian government chose Drupal because we have a massive technology community spread around the world, massive redundancy, multiple service providers across hosting, across cloud, across support, and so on. And, frankly, a massive commercial entity in Acquia that ended up being the main service provider for the Australian government. But the community was actually the reason why the Australian government chose us. And it's been great for us. It's been great for Acquia. It's been great for the Drupal community in Australia. It's been a second White House in many ways. So you need to care about soft, squishy stuff like our values, because part of this is what holds our community together and what almost exploded our community this year, which was utterly terrifying. So, yeah. Interestingly, I was talking with some people about preparing this, and they had the misapprehension that this was somehow a statistically significant or scientific survey or some data or something. I conducted an online survey about our community values to find out better what people were thinking, and hopefully to get a sense of what was going on in our community and how people felt coming out of this crisis and into what the shape the community should be now. So this is not really data, okay, and this is not science, and this is not statistics. Running a survey was my way of having more conversations with people faster than I could over individual beers with all of you, over the course of a lifetime of DrupalCamps. And what I was looking for when I ran the survey was stories and feelings and just seeing what was going on out there. And as I said before, this is just me giving one idea about how I think our community could be stronger and more scalable later. 112 people answered my survey. That's relatively good in this world. I've done developer surveys in the past where 17 people responded, and I still wrote a blog post about it. So, it's a very small number of people compared to the number of people who do Drupal, but it was a lot of answers, and I got a lot of free text answers, and I really do have material for, a bunch of blog posts to write about this, and there's things that I need to respond to and things that I think are funny. So I think I'm going to be coming back to this topic more, and you can certainly look out for me posting about this in the next couple of months. 112 responses, 53.6%. 60 people thought that on a scale of 1 to 5, the community aspect was important to them, and 38 people gave it a 4 out of 5. So, in the end, just about 90% of the people who answered really do feel the community is important. Now, these are people who self-selected to respond to the survey, who follow me or follow people who follow me on social media. So, the sample is what it is. But in Drupal, more than in a lot of places, we feel this community thing. So I was not surprised by this at all, but that's Drupal then. So we care about community. This was interesting. I asked, how are you involved in the Drupal community? Drupal being some or all of my job, got the most answers. Almost everyone who answered attends community events. Most people evangelize Drupal in some form. Most people, have no life and no hobbies outside of Drupal. I swear I am going to take up yoga before the year ends, but so far not. Good number of contributors, decent number of sponsors, considering the the long tail sort of scale of sponsorship. So okay, that was interesting. This is a cross section of relatively enthusiastic Drupalists, I guess. One of my favorite answers, and like I said, I have a lot more of these answers that I'm going to do something with, but this shows some level of enthusiasm. And who knows Vijay in London? He works for, I think he was working for Capgemini for a long time. Hey, Chandy. Vijay, I'm not going to risk his last name. Anyway, I was doing helping Dries prepare his Dries note for DrupalCon Dublin, and did an interview with Vijay, and his daughter was just a couple of months old at that point, and I could hear her in the background, and we were talking about her, and I said, completely jokingly, I said, "Hey Vijay, you know, why didn't you name her Drupal?" And he goes, "My wife wouldn't let me." Anyway, yeah, so we are not a cult. Yes, I love this. And I couldn't believe that this came up in the Google search results for Drupal dog. Thought that was great. I did not construct that. Now, here is where the not science and not statistically valid and not real sample becomes very important. Here's 112 people who told me what they thought. I know that they are men and women, and I know they come from different places, and I know they are different ages. I know, given some of their private answers to me, they do have radically different political views. Fine. Nonetheless, this is just me having conversations with people. So I let people vote on this scale of this value word, you know, respect and responsibility and contribution, this word, you know, on a scale of extremely important to, let's see, how does it go? Extremely important, very important, somewhat important, not so important, not at all important kind of scale, on one of those matrix things. They rated these abstract nouns. And then I added extremely important and very important together to get a score, and then I ranked those using dumb, just not the Olympic style where if you have 2 third places, then you can only go to the 5th place. Just simple for me. To get a sense of what's important to these people. And interestingly, contribution didn't come up nearly as high as I might have expected. This is something I really, really care about personally, the fact that our project, you know, that we make an incredible positive difference in the world, that, you know, anybody with access to the web can go and build community and communicate with our stuff. That's vitally important to me in the open source context. I think diversity came a little lower than I expected it, but it's only, you know, the band here, there's not very many points in there.
Jan, would you mind if I asked you a very quick question?
I'm absolutely open to that.
What do you think the difference
Alex.
between contribution and collaboration is? Because a lot of people might see collaboration as contribution.
Fair enough. So part of what I was doing here was, in some cases, I do think that these are, there's, if not completely synonymous, they're Venn diagrams in their meanings. And as plenty of people pointed out to me, they're like, how can you do this? What do you mean respect? Do you mean respect the code, respect the people? You know, in my culture, this means one thing, you know, and I don't even have a single definition in my mind. So, but I did that on purpose. And some of these things are clearly, imagine that I'm looking at everything that I believe in Drupal, in open source, and just different perspectives on what I think about it. So you know, accountability and honesty and integrity are pretty close as well, right? So no science here, just a lot of words. And one of the things that I'm going to get to as well is these words are, I had a trick in mind with these words anyway. So that's the ranking that we got for these abstract value concepts from the people. And for as much as transparency came up in the spring, and as much as it came up in every side of the mess we were in, you know, it didn't rank as high as I expected. I left the field open for people to suggest other values, and somebody wrote xylophone, and somebody wrote probably, which was maybe my favorite, but I think it's because I framed the question as, are there any values that I have forgotten? Probably. And there's a trend here. You see a lot of tolerance, understanding, freedom words come up. There's some of this sort of anti-commercial feeling in some of those. You can see that, I think sustainability is really great. I think that's a great concept that I forgot. And the quality one is pretty important too. Oh, and I forgot to point out one thing. When the people were talking about what they do in Drupal, I missed a couple of points. One of the biggest answers was event organizing, and thank you everyone here who helped organize this thing. Where was that? This one, yeah. So event organizing was huge as an other answer. Mentoring, speaking, support, writing documentation, doing publicity on social media and articles came up. Right, just to give a picture, so mentoring and event organizing is actually a really, really significant thing in our community. And I wanted to take the time, and this is a good adjuncture as any, to thank all of the sponsors and thank the organizing committee for inviting me over. I'm really, really happy to be here. And without your help, I wouldn't have been able to make it this time. So, you know, that's even, well, my thanks is very heartfelt. Here's another nice levity as a value in the community. That's, you know, for some reason, this idea that we have the DrupalCon pre-note that's become a tradition in our community, this is something that completely boggles my mind, that we can get away with doing this, you know, having themer and coder battle it out at DrupalCon as an official event is pretty fantastic, frankly. So here's some of what I was talking about in terms of the, you know, gosh, these words are pretty abstract sort of comments. Yeah, the second one's nicely, you know, validly skeptical. There was another comment that I really liked that said some of these values, we don't need to be so explicit about them, because if we treat each other with base level, solid respect and develop trust between each other, all of the other good stuff follows. I like that comment as well. But anyway, there was some very healthy skepticism, which I would expect from our community, and I like, frankly. And we have this ranking of these things, these words that I thought of when I was writing the survey. You know, now these could be our values. We could adopt these. The 112 people that I surveyed, you know, told us that these are the most important 11 or 12 values in their minds. And so I was wondering, how do you represent this in a statement of value? You can't say, we do openness, right? And you certainly couldn't enforce that in a code of conduct. There's this, so we need to define concrete actions. We need to make working definitions of these concepts that reflect who we are, who we believe we are, and have to be able to act on them. So, you know, and then if we express them in a concrete way, that can kind of become like documentation, because we can measure whether we're doing that. And if it comes up that we're not consistently, of course, we have the chance to iterate on everything that we've talked about. So, you know, there are some really, really good examples of taking abstract concepts like respect and turning them into very concrete statements. And rather than trying to make up what our value set expressed as actions might look like, because I also don't think it's my place. I really think this is going to have to be a community effort. I found, I want to talk about 3 examples from the real world, the so-called real world, of organizations who do this quite well. There's a movement in the United States called Black Lives Matter, and they have a set of guiding principles, and they're very interesting and they're very powerful, and it doesn't matter whether you agree with them or not. They say some great things along the way. One of their guiding principles is empathy, and I think empathy is very important, and it's a tool that I use in my communication work all the time. And when they say empathy, there's another tile down there that says empathy on it, and behind the empathy tile it says, "We are committed to practicing empathy. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their contexts," right? So we promise to do this thing, and we engage people in this way. That's pretty nice. They have another one which is called loving engagement, and I think that this one is pretty good for Drupal. I might phrase it slightly differently, but they say, we are committed to embodying and practicing justice, liberation, and peace in our engagements with one another. Now, that would prevent a lot of flame wars if you acted upon it truly. And diversity is a word, is one of their guiding principles, and I think that that's something that a lot of us in Drupal very firmly stand behind as well. Black Lives Matter movement expresses this as, we are committed to acknowledging, respecting, and celebrating differences and commonalities. I really like that. It's really, really nice. My all-time favorite, and I really do have an all-time favorite statement of values, the Harvard Divinity School, of all places, has a very, very powerful document about their community values. So Harvard, the institution itself, has a statement of values which is great, but the Divinity School takes each Harvard value and expands upon it and talks about it in a deeper context, and it's very, very powerful. We have respect up in our top 11, 12 list there somewhere from the survey. So at Harvard University, the statement is respect for the rights, differences, and dignity of others. It's okay. It's not necessarily a concrete action. At the Harvard Divinity School, they talk about respect this way. We seek to respect, understand, and learn from the cultures and beliefs of the members of our diverse community. This covers a lot of ground. We seek to respect, understand, and learn from the cultures and beliefs of the members of our diverse community. Conscious of our own levels of privileges, we seek with kindness and compassion to engage in open and active dialogue that broadens our perspective, increases our knowledge and awareness, and fosters mutual understanding and empowerment. These are people studying theology, and I'm, glad to see that they're very, open and try to be as understanding as possible. But this is, for me, this is incredibly aspirational, really, really, really inspiring. So they don't only talk about respect, they talk about honesty and integrity, which is another thing that we have in our top 10 there. Accountability and conscientious pursuit of excellence, which is also interesting. And I think as open source people, given that we have to show all our work every time we do something, that's probably relevant to us too. So anyway, so I cannot recommend this highly enough as a bit of a follow-up reading. And the last thing, interestingly, is, and this came from a comment in my surveys as a response in the survey. Somebody said I think, I'm quoting now, I think a statement of values can be helpful, but ideally would be intentionally succinct. I have always loved the Agile Manifesto in style and substance. 4 values of things we value more than others, and a dozen principles that provide more detail. Right, so this stuff we live every day. Who has not worked in some version of Scrum in their career to date? Okay, I understand why. The joys and the other non-joys of agile methodologies are pretty special, but these are really interesting. And I think if we tried to define our community and how we work this way, it would be really, really challenging, right? But individuals and interactions, they value those over processes and tools. Well, I don't know. If we don't have processes and tools, how can we be scalable and so on? But the way they phrase these things can be a source of a lot of inspiration for us. And there are 12 principles. What if you said, what if you said something about giving Drupal community members the environment and support they need to get their job done, to be, to contribute, to work together. What if you say healthy communities promote sustainable development, and the stakeholders should be able to, work on Drupal happily and healthily for the rest of their lives, kind of thing. I think that's germane. We have a code of conduct in Drupal, and I was very proud. I've been very proud of this document for many years, because the process that we went through and the angst and the how hard it was at the beginning. There were camps that were very, very far apart. in trying to put together what the code of conduct would look like. And in a very short amount of time and very intense discussion, the community came together and created a document which is actually, there's a lot of good to it. I mean, it says be considerate, be respectful, be collaborative, and it explains what these things mean. And it's not that long, but it is a mix of idealistic statements that are tied to suggested actions, mixed with statements about the procedures that happen when somebody breaks these, unfortunately, a little bit vaguely formulated principles that we've stated. And so I've come to the conclusion that we need to pick this apart. And I think that the idealistic stuff, I think that how we are collaborative, how we are respectful, if we rephrase those as actionable, concrete statements, add, subtract, whatever we like, separate that as a statement of values, that lets us then create a very, if we want to have a new code of conduct, if we want to have a rules body, if we want to, whatever it is, to, and whether we think about enforcement or encouragement or whatever, I think that these aspects need to be pulled apart, because I think that the spring showed us very clearly that a mixture of idealism and procedure in this form ended up letting us all down, ended up putting even more pressure on Dries and making it very, very difficult for a lot of people in our community to perceive what is Dries's concrete specific role in all of this, where does the Drupal Association stand, what is the community responsible for, and I think that pulling things apart and being a little more clear could help us get through this sort of thing easier over time. So I have this idea that if we talk in a very concrete way about who we are and how we want to live who we are, that will allow us to create structures, procedures, whatever we like, to scale our community, to make it a healthier place, where it's easier to get more exciting work done and have more great time together and a lot less angst. And I would be very happy to be a part of that. All of that would allow us to make our what, which is letting us do more Drupal and more cool projects and working together more and meeting more friends around the world in this crazy thing we do. So, if I've inspired you at all, there is an ongoing diversity and inclusiveness working group. There's movement on the part of Dries and the Drupal Association to rethink our governance, and I highly encourage you to go find out what's going on and jump in. I could make some introductions, but I'm not any more connected to these people really than any of you. And if I've gotten it completely wrong, in your view, that's cool, and we can talk about it. But if that inspires you to go and do it right, then I'm still happy, and I think my job has, my time has been well spent. It's really, really great to be here. This is also my third DrupalCamp Bristol in a row. I'm really, really happy to be here with you all. I will be here all weekend. I'm pretty easy to find online and everywhere else in all the usual apps and so on. And thank you so much for your time.